through this company, and I started to put in money from out of my paycheck,
Oh yeah,
that
yeah.
I was single, and then the last year that I worked, I decided to retire, maybe in the middle of the winter, retire on my birthday in August.
Yeah.
So the scout executive, actually the Boy Scouts had changed some of the benefits of retirement, and the
Mhm.
scout executive thought I might like to consider retiring at 60. So I drove up to the office in Waterbury one day because he wanted to see me. He had everything worked out, and he said, if you want to retire, he said, I will bump your salary up to $30,000 a year.
Oh wow.
But realize now, he only had to pay that till the middle of August.
Yeah.
So he wasn't going to pay me $30,000 a year.
Yeah.
And so he showed me how I could bump up my investment in this stock fund.
Mhm.
So I thought about it, and I decided I was going to go. So I retired. And I had about, I think I had about $23,000 in
Mhm.
that. And it was earning about 18%.
Oh, that's
That was
amazing.
paying off on the stock market.
Yeah.
And then it dropped down about 10.5, but still,
Very
you
good.
know. And Pat and Jane wrote me a tearjerker letter.
Oh.
And I can't remember what the reason was now, but they had to have, he wanted his share
Yeah.
of that, because they were the beneficiaries of it if I died.
Mhm.
So I said, all right. And that's when I was living with Deirdre in Boston.
Yeah.
So I got 1/5 of that fund out, and I paid it to them. Well, within a year and a half, Kathy wanted hers, Greg wanted his, and Jenny, I decided, Jenny and Becky, I was gonna just eliminate the fund and give them their share now,
Yeah.
because I had done it to the others.
Mhm.
And I'm sorry I did that ever since.
Oh.
That, it wouldn't be earning much money now with the market the way it is, but probably that fund would have been over $30,000 now.
Yeah. Insane.
So anyway,
It's rough because I know we don't have a lot of money, but we don't have any credit card debt, and we don't have any car debt or anything like that. So at least we don't have that we're, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like we're not wealthy. We're just college students, but we don't have that debt it just weighs you down.
you
So,
betcha.
well, anyway, I guess we'll get started. So this is my recorder. I'm recording, but I just wanted to ask you about your grandparents. And so if you could say, maybe we'll start with your dad's parents because you know them the best. What their names were, and then if you just wanted to tell me about them.
Well, my father's parents' names were Edward and Gertrude McMahon,
Yeah.
and I do know them very well and have a lot of memories of them because my mother died when I was 3,
Yeah.
and my father was a chauffeur and on the road a lot, and consequently I was brought up by his parents,
Yeah.
and I never saw that much of my father, but they were great. Uh, she was a great cook, and when I moved in with them, I was probably 3.5 years old or about that,
Yeah.
and I think I've told you this, that we didn't have an inside toilet
No, I
at
didn't
that
know
time.
that.
Well, they lived on the bottom floor of a Victorian house. They had another family on the second floor. And outside our kitchen was a woodshed, a lot like the back shed here.
Mhm.
And there was a little room at the end of that woodshed that had a two-hole outhouse in it. It was like an outhouse that was inside,
Yeah.
but it might just as well have been outside because there was no heat out there. Well, and we also didn't have a bathtub, and we only had one cold water tap in the sink. All the hot water was heated on a, at that time, it was a wood stove.
Oh my gosh.
And later on, that was converted to kerosene.
Yep.
And while I was, I don't know how old I was, but the landlord put in a bathroom with a toilet and a bathtub and a wash basin. And hot water was made off the stove in the kitchen. And there was a hot water and cold water in the bathroom and also in the kitchen sink.
Oh my gosh.
And prior to that, Saturday night was bath night. And the water was heated and put in this tub on the floor. I had the first bath, and my grandmother had the second bath, and my grandfather had the third bath.
Same water?
And it was without a change of water, just adding more water off the kettle on the stove to keep it warm enough.
Yeah.
But they were great people. My grandfather worked, most of the life he worked in an axe mill, because the town of Douglas was famous for its axes and hatchets. And later in life, he was a gardener, took care of the flowers and the lawns, and also the automobiles for a wealthy family in town. In fact, the man that my father chauffeured for
Yeah.
owned the woolen mill.
I remember you telling me that.
So my grandfather was the handyman around their house in Douglas. His nickname was Plug, because he chewed plug tobacco.
Oh.
And plug tobacco used to come in a little tin can, about the size of a package of cigarettes. It was wrapped up in paper, and it was like a candy bar in consistency, about a half-inch thick, 2.5 inches by 3 inches. And he had a jackknife which he cut off a piece of tobacco and put it in and chew it. That's how he got his nickname.
Plug.
And after he retired, he really didn't do much work at all. And of course there was no television then, but we had a big Zenith radio.
Oh.
And we listened to the radio a lot for news. And I used to listen to adventure stories like Jack Armstrong and Terry and the Pirates. And my grandfather, I can picture him now, every night he would have the radio on and time to listen to Amos and Andy,
Amos.
which were two white men that imitated two black men that ran a taxi company. Very, very famous radio show, and it went on into television.
Yeah.
Right after Amos and Andy was Lowell Thomas and the News, another long-run show, and there were all kinds of drama on. My grandmother would be in there with us in the living room watching TV, radio, listening to radio lots of times. And I remember my grandmother usually going to bed earlier than my grandfather. And I don't know what their income. I don't think there was Social Security then.
Yeah.
So either they had savings or something, but there was no income from work anyway. But there was always good food, and when necessary, they were strong disciplinarians, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
One of my treats was on Friday night at 10 o'clock on the radio, there was always a prize fight.
Like boxing?
And this was back in the age of Joe Louis and Max Schmeling. And I would be in bed, but my grandfather would come in and get me or wake me up and bring me in. I would lay in front of the radio on the floor listening to the prize ice pipes on Friday night. That was a big treat. And he used to go hunting quite a little, and shot squirrels and rabbits.
Do you guys eat those?
My grandmother could prepare very
Oh my
tastefully
gosh.
to supplement the diet. He had a little garden that he liked, and well, they were just very loving. They had, I think they had two children, my Aunt Annie and my dad.
Mhm.
And Aunt Annie had 4 daughters, and they visited quite often. And one of Annie's daughters, Dorothy Scribner, became a school teacher, and she lived with my grandmother and grandfather and I for quite a few years
Oh wow.
while she taught school. And when she married, she moved out. But I remember my Aunt Dorothy taking me with my hand and bringing me to school on my first day of school in the first grade
Oh wow.
at Douglas Elementary. They were just great people.
Mm.
We had a dog that was named Bimbo. He was a fox terrier. He had black ears, a little bit of brown on his chin, and on his left side, he had a big round spot. And he was a great pet. We didn't have any cats. And of course, back in those days, a lot of things were delivered to the house.
Yeah.
Like ice, because there weren't refrigerators.
Oh, that's right.
You had an ice box. That was one of my chores, was emptying the bucket at the bottom of the ice box, because it melted and filled up.
Yep.
I emptied that in the bathtub. And another chore that they assigned to me was we had a coal furnace downstairs. And I learned how to shake the ashes out of that. And those were collected in a ash can. And I had to go outdoors through the cellar door. And those were spread on the driveway, dirt driveway. And well, my grandfather's one fault was that he loved whiskey.
Whiskey?
Yep. He drank a lot, never drank in the house, but he drank a lot, and especially with some of his buddies. And we used to get a laugh. My father used to say that, I can't remember the man's name now, but he used to come and pick up my grandfather. And this man didn't have a farm, but he had a potato field.
Yeah.
About 3 miles outside of town.
Mhm.
Well, I'd say to something like, where's Grandpa? My father would say, well, he's up with Will McGraw. That was the guy.
Will McGraw?
He's up with Will McGraw at the potato patch, and they're watching the potatoes grow. And I came to understand that they were up there drinking their whiskey.
Oh.
And I have to say there were some hard times, because not a lot of times, but many times, I remember my grandfather being brought home and literally dumped on the doorstep.
Oh my gosh.
And my grandmother and I had to lift this man up. He was big. He was about 6'4", had a great shock of white hair and a big white mustache. A large man. And we'd have to struggle with him, get him into the kitchen, put his head under the faucet. My grandmother would run cold water on his head, and then give him coffee, and we'd put him to bed. And unfortunately, he died with heart disease.
Oh no.
Both my grandmother and my grandfather died while I was in the Navy in World War II, so I was not able to get home to their funerals. But I know they were a very, very loving couple. I could see that. I probably didn't realize it when I was a boy, but I certainly did when I became a man. And we had a store in Douglas called the Jenks's Store. And they would deliver goods, but normally about once a week, my grandmother would call in an order to the store, and I'd have to walk downtown in Douglas to get it and bring it back home.
Yeah.
And one of the things I remember vividly was that my grandfather loved tripe. Do you know what tripe is?
No, what is that?
It's the inside of a cow's
Cow.
udder,
Yeah.
Oh.
and it's fried, and it was a delicacy. I guess to some people it's still a delicacy. But sometimes it'd be just that tripe. And there were two sisters that ran this store, and I'd go down. The tripe was kept in a barrel of brine, salted water. They would reach down with a fork, pick up a slice of this tripe, which was, like a chuck steak, about the size
Yeah.
of a chuck steak, but not as thick.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be dripping. They'd hold it, and let the brine drip off. They'd wrap it up in butcher paper, and tie it with a string, and put it in a bag. And I don't know, but invariably, on my way home, it was about a little over a quarter of a mile back to where we lived, I would always manage to have some of that brine drip onto the side of my trousers, and it would smell. And sometimes I walked home holding it out at about 2 feet from my side. But they were great people, and I loved them dearly. I think I don't remember any other particular stories about them. My grandmother was a very quiet woman. My grandfather liked to smoke a pipe too, and once in a while an Italian stogie, which was very smelling. I wish I could remember how old they were when they died, but I can't. So, that was my father's mother and father.
And
Her
then
maiden name was Belding,
Belden.
and I know your mother has all the genealogy on both sides
Yeah.
of the family, yes.
Did your grandmother let your grandpa smoke his pipe in the house?
Oh,
or
yeah.
Did she make him go outside?
And a cigar, too.
And a cigar.
But I don't know whether it was his decision or hers that he never drank
Never drank in the house.
in the house.
That's good.
And I never heard her complain about it.
Really?
Yep, she just, when the time came we had to take care of him, we took care of him. But I never heard her swear at him or talk to me about his bad habit or whatever.
She sounds like a good woman.
She was, yeah, she certainly was. She was a little stout lady with white hair. Used to knit a lot. I can close my eyes and picture her sitting in a chair rocking like I am now outside the window.
That's
And that was about it for the McMahon side.
neat. And then the Provost side, did they live in East Douglas as well?
No. My grandfather's name was Henry John Provo. And he was a born salesman. And interestingly enough, when he grew up in, if I remember correctly, in a village called Manchog. That was next to East Douglas. And Manchog was a section of the town of Sutton, a much larger town. And when he was a teenager, he worked for this Jenks' store in Douglas,
Oh.
a stock boy, and he did some delivering with horse and wagon. They were in the automobiles when he was a young man,
Yeah.
a boy rather. And he was married 3 times.
Oh my gosh.
And I think not all his life, but when I was a boy, he always lived in Manchog.
Mm.
And his first wife was Augustine McDonald. And I think your mother has told me that she died about 3 months after my mother, Ruth, was born.
Yeah.
And I don't have any memories of her at all.
Mm.
check with your mother. I think they had a child,
Mhm.
which was Henry Jr.
Oh, okay.
And then, his second wife died also. And then his third wife was named Charlotte Theverge, spelled with a T. And it's always been fascinating to me that my Pepe, as I called him, Henry, his third wife was a daughter-in-law. Now that sounds strange, but Charlotte Theverge was the oldest of 5 sisters. And no, I think maybe the second child, his second child was Wilfred Provost.
Mhm.
And Wilfred Provost married Aurelia Theverge. So she was my grandfather's daughter-in-law.
Oh my gosh.
And for his third wife, my grandfather chose the oldest of the 5 sisters, Charlotte.
Oh my gosh. So father and son were married to sisters.
Yeah,
I never knew that.
which was interesting. Yeah, but after he was married, he became, from my memory, the first Maytag washing machine salesman in Worcester County. And he was a crackerjack. And the Maytag washing machine was something brand new, you know, the old Ringer washing machine.
Yep.
And he was a traveling salesman.
Oh my gosh.
And went around in his Chandler automobile selling washing machines. He did that for many, many, many years. Charlotte was a homemaker,
Mhm.
and I might be corrected, but I think she had my uncle Henry
Mhm.
Provost Jr.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I don't remember my grandfather's second wife at all. But I do remember my father taking me driving over to Manshaw, like on a Friday after school when I was a boy, and leaving me with my grandfather and grandmother for the weekend.
Yeah.
And she was a great cook. I had a Lionel train set that he had bought me
Ooh.
that was kept there, and I played with it there. Used to go for a lot of rides. And Charlotte, I always called Meme,
Meme.
which is grandmother in French. She was a very thin, slight woman. And it seemed to me when she was on the telephone, 3/4 of the time she always conversed in French with friends. Well, later on in life, and I think once again, this is around the time when I had graduated from high school and gone into the Navy. And my grandfather must have done something else for a while.
Yeah.
But he and Charlotte moved to Southbridge, Massachusetts.
Oh my goodness.
And he became the manager of a hardware store
Oh wow.
in that town. And there were 2 parent hardware stores. He managed one of them in what was called the Globe district of Southbridge.
Yeah.
And I was old enough then when I got back from World War II to have a car, and I used to drive over there
Oh.
weekends to visit them. By that time, of course, Wilfred had married. Of course, my mother had died, and my Uncle Henry had married too, so they had no children with them.
Yep.
And I used to visit them fairly often and enjoyed them very much. I can't remember going to either of their funerals
Oh.
for some reason. And once again, your mother would have to tell me when they died,
Yep.
and I could place where I was at the time, but I'm not sure.
Mm.
But my grandfather was a big man. Reminded me of William Howard Taft, the president.
Oh really?
He had that immense chest and belly. And it was the same over in Southbridge. My grandmother spoke French a lot to her friends there. I guess that's about it as far as remembering them.
Yeah.
I only remember my mother one time.
Oh, yeah?
That's when my father's father and mother and he and I and my mother Ruth were living in a house in East Douglas.
Mm.
And I was 3 years old, and it had to be a holiday, either Christmas or Thanksgiving. And I remember my father coming into the living room and taking me by the hand, and we went into the bedroom where my mother was sick in bed.
Yeah.
She died of tuberculosis, so perhaps she had that disease at that time, or the early stages of it. And I can remember him putting me up on the bed, and I was there with her for maybe 4 or 5 minutes. And then we went out into the dining room for dinner.
Yeah.
And that's what makes me think it was a holiday.
Yeah.
And that's the only time, unfortunately, that I can remember my mother.
Mm.
But my Pepe and my Meme and my grandma and grandfather McMahon were really wonderful people. And I lived in what was a different era, as you
Yeah.
can tell.
Yeah.
And but they were both loving, and Meme was a wonderful wife to my grandfather. I know how devoted she was to him.
Mm.
And I think that's about it.
Mm. Did your grandparents know each other, the two sides? Were they acquaintances?
Oh, I think, yes, by just acquaintance. I don't remember the Provosts ever visiting the McMahons,
Oh, really?
no.
Mm.
But they lived in different towns, of course.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I'm sure that with Pepe working at Jenks' store, that sometime in their lives, my grandfather and grandmother, McMahon, must have come in contact
Oh,
with
yeah.
them.
Yeah. I've always wondered just how your parents must have met. If they grew up in different towns, I thought maybe through their parents, or...
Well, I don't know. You know, I never asked my father that.
Yeah.
Now, my mother went to Douglas High School,
Yeah.
and so did my Uncle Henry and my Uncle Wilfred. All
Yeah.
went to Douglas High School. Something must have had a high school, but for some reason they came. And I can remember my Uncle Henry telling me about when he had a car going to high school. He would pick up these girls every day and bring them to school. He was very popular because he had a car, you know.
Yeah.
And they all graduated there, so it's a possibility that they met during high school.
Yeah.
But, and I'm sure their ages must have been about the same, although I don't know how old they were.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Well, I was born in 1927, so that means my mother was born in 1924.
Mm.
No, she couldn't have been born yet, because she died in 1930 when I was 3.
Mm.
So, but I don't know the ages. But that's a possibility that they
Yeah.
met in high school.
Mm. That's neat.
And they're all buried in the Evergreen Cemetery in Douglas, Massachusetts. And I say that the families were never terrifically close during their lives, but they are in the cemetery because the McMahon Cemetery plot and the Provo Cemetery plot are side by
It's
side
right next to each other.
in that cemetery. I don't know if that's a coincidence or if it was planned that way.
That's
Yeah.
neat. That's neat. Well, that's great. I
that
think
okay?
that's great.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.